It's important to remember that you carry quite a lot of the responsibility for your relationship with your supervisor during the dissertation process. The first thing you'll need to do is check your handbook and clarify exactly how many meetings you're allowed to have with your supervisor throughout the course of writing the dissertation. This will help you plan and will help you agree perhaps on a schedule of meetings with your supervisor if possible. It's also important to check how many drafts, if any, your supervisor is allowed to read of your dissertation. It may be that your supervisor is allowed to read a couple of sections and give you feedback or a certain number of words, but you should be aware of what they are allowed to do so that you don't assume, wrongly sometimes, that you can get detailed feedback on the whole of your written work. So check this very early on. And finally, also check for what responsibilities exactly your department are placing on you for the dissertation process and the relationship with the supervisor. Quite often it will be stipulated that you are the one to instigate the meetings. Therefore, you must take this responsibility seriously and plan ahead. It's no good asking a supervisor for a meeting the day before you need it. For example, you need to plan very carefully and see what you're expected to do. So do check your handbook and clarify everything as soon as you can. It's really important that you prepare carefully for any meetings that you have with your supervisor. This means making sure you've done all the suggested reading or writing that you should have done in order to prepare for the meeting. It also means having questions ready. And remember, if you have questions to ask your supervisor, make sure they're specific questions rather than vague ones. Make sure that you've thought them through quite carefully and that you can relate them to specific aspects of your dissertation. So it might be that you have a question about your methods that you're not quite sure, you need something clarifying. Or it might be a question about your writing. Quite often, it might be that you need to show how you have acted on feedback from the previous meeting. So if your supervisor has asked you to redo something or to check something, make sure you've done that and that you report back on that. And finally, as regards meetings with supervisors, it's very important if you have a problem with the dissertation process to mention this to your supervisor. Quite often students can be reluctant to mention problems to their supervisor because they feel that the supervisor is involved in the assessment process. But it's far better to make your supervisor aware of any problem and how you're dealing with it, rather than leaving it to the last minute when it might be too late to do something about the problem. So do keep your supervisor aware of any problems that are happening. After your meeting with your supervisor is also an important time. It's important to quickly write up the notes of what you agreed and also a list of anything that you need to be doing before the next meeting. You could even clarify this with your tutor, with your supervisor, by sending them a brief email outlining what has been agreed. This can help clear up any misunderstandings and can help you to find out if you've perhaps made a mistake in what you thought you were supposed to be doing. So do make sure that you quickly do that after any meeting. It's quite important. The final thing to consider when working with your supervisor is that all supervisors, all academics, have a very, very heavy workload. So as well as your dissertation, they'll be supervising other dissertations, possibly master's students as well, and PhD students. They'll be carrying out their own research, they'll be preparing their teaching, marking and assessing. And of course, they also have their private lives. So please be considerate of your tutors and make sure you use the time that you have together to the best possible effect that you can and that you don't make unreasonable demands on them.